My name's Randy Hoffman, a full-time lecturer in the Department of Accounting. I do use Proctorio.
I'm April Franklin. I'm over in business communication. I use Proctorio.
Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Tracy Statler. I am in the Department of Kinesiology. I do not use Proctorio.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Dust. I teach in the Department of Public Health, and I do use Proctorio.
I strongly agree with that statement. At the beginning of last semester, I noticed normal test scores with 450 students taking the exam. They matched my previous 10 years worth of data. As the semester progressed, that score continued to creep up till like exam 3. It was sky high. And I said, the course isn't getting easier and my exam writing is pretty much the same. So there's something going on. And it was clear to me there was cheating going on during the exam. I think to maintain the integrity of the university, as well as the integrity of the individual's student grade, Proctorio is necessary.
I also strongly agree with the statement. I told my students this semester we'd be using it because it gives them credibility as well. That when they go out for job interviews, they get to say that their university cared enough about integrity and academic performance and rigor that they adapted appropriately to ensure that the graduates that were coming out of Cal State Fullerton were actually demonstrating the needed skills to be professionals.
I'm going to diverge here. I would say that I slightly disagree. I do agree that there is a need to maintain integrity of the university and to ensure that a student's grade accurately reflects their work. Where I disagree is the idea that Proctorio is the only way for us to be able to ensure that. Rather than go to the proctoring software, I made the decision, I had the luxury to make the decision to change up my assessments in a way that allowed me to determine more in-depth thinking and processing. But again, that's based on my situation and the smaller class sizes that I often teach.
And I have to go along with the slightly agree section. As part-time faculty, I'm evaluated every year, and this is my 6th year. So now I just did my 3-year my 6-year comprehensive review, and I have to include evidence of rigor. And so I have to have exams in there. I have to have quizzes. I have to have other papers and things of that nature. I'm also evaluated on whether or not my grades are within departmental standards. I'm also going to be penalized for students using whatever means necessary to get the best grade that they can. Proctorio is a necessary step towards maintaining integrity of the university. I wish it wasn't the only one that we had, though.
Initially, the concern was valid because there wasn't a lot of education. The thought was, if there's a loud noise in the room or mom walks through the background, I'm automatically flagged and I'm going to fail the test. When I discovered that, I spent some time with my class saying, you know what, guys, that's not the way it works. Nothing is an automatic. It's the instructor that will make the determination as to whether or not you have cheated on an exam. If the dog runs through the background and makes a loud noise, yes, maybe Proctorio is going to flag you. But when I look at it, unless the dog is giving you answers to your accounting questions, I'm okay with that, right? If mom doesn't really understand that you are taking an exam and delivers cookies and milk, as long as there's no debits and credits on the little napkin, I'm okay with that too.
I mean, their phone's on them. As they get concerned about it, they're emailing me from their phone. That's tracking everything they do. Every time I speak of something, my phone now finds it and tells me about it. One of my students had a problem. She didn't want them on her computer. That was her main issue. So she went and got a university computer. Because I asked her, I said, you want to Zoom with me? And she's like, no, I just got a university computer. I don't want them on my computer. And I thought to myself, yeah, honey, they're on your computer when you're on Zoom. But okay, if you want to draw that line there, that's all right. Everything you do on campus is tracked and maintained in databases. Again, it's the cohort. We've given up a lot of our privacy already.
Regardless of what I personally believe, I do understand why students are uncomfortable. A lot of our students have a very different workspace setup than what I have the luxury and the privilege to be able to enjoy. That they share their spaces with a variety of other family members or roommates, or might be embarrassed by what they do or don't have in the backgrounds behind them. So regardless of what my personal opinion is, I would strongly agree that I get why students are uncomfortable with this, regardless of what Big Brother is currently capturing on their other usage.
When you sign up to do Proctorio, it sounds really invasive. They have access to all your passcodes and everything that you do on your computer. To me, I would probably be a bit concerned about that as well. Outside of that, though, I made it a requirement, unless you have extenuating circumstances, to turn your cameras on when we're in class. I need to see your faces. I need to be able to judge whether you're having that glazed over eyes look or not. It's really no different than if we were on a Zoom call in class kind of thing, to where when you're on Proctorio, if it's just me watching you, I already do that while we're in Zoom in class. All right. Nobody else is watching this. It's not going to the police department or something watching you while you're taking your test.
I don't believe I have a choice. I must use Proctorio. I have approximately 220 plus students in each of my 2 classes that I teach. Because of the size and the nature of the class, I have to use multiple choice. Upper division classes, smaller classes have more of a choice in terms of the type of exam that they can provide for students to demonstrate their knowledge. But for the number of students that I have, I'm restricted to multiple choice. I think the monitoring of a multiple choice exam is very important, because even if you rewrite the questions, which I do, and change the numbers, which I do, you can still Google a lot of these questions pretty quickly. And using a second device, which some do, it provides an unfair advantage.
For all the reasons I've said before, we need to limit the cheating. First of all, I am also, like Professor Hoffman, I'm required to use it. It adds credibility to the grades that they have and what they're earning. As I said in the beginning, I have no idea what I have on. I know I have video on because I can see them. I know I have that, but I have to allow them to open other windows. They're allowed to log back in. That's a setting I have because they crash. But I had to play with it to get it to tweak to the point where the students could use it without getting crashed out. But that's just the nature of my assessments. They have to be that way.
I prefer not to use Proctorio, so I don't have to limit any of the settings because I don't use the platform at all. I did investigate it and I did play around with it, and I beta tested it with a couple of my graduate students. If I were to use it, for me to feel morally and ethically okay, I would have had to disable so many of the settings that it wasn't worth using Proctorio when I could do the same thing in a much easier, much cleaner, less glitchy, less likely to crash sort of way. Didn't feel like a valuable return on investment to have to disable the majority of the things that the program provided for it to meet my criteria. There's also a lot of pedagogical changes that I've made to the way that I do assessments as a result of this online virtual learning environment. I just know that it doesn't work for the way I teach and the way that I assess.
I prefer not to use Proctorio, but I feel like I have to. I use Proctorio more as a deterrent versus trying to catch somebody. I do record their screen, full screen. They can't right click. They can't copy and paste. They can't open other browsers. The microphone is on. The camera is on. I do allow the setting where if they have to make a bathroom run, go ahead. You can leave and come back. I just hope, cross my fingers, that you're not memorizing a question or two while you're in the bathroom and looking it up on your phone. And so I try to limit the ability for them to have access to outside information. I have it lenient on a lot of the settings for like your eye tracking and sound and all that kind of stuff, because frankly, what I don't like about Proctorio is it flags too much. If I go look at my report, 75% of the students had outlier volume activity. And I have to go and watch it and go, oh, their dog barked. Okay, big deal.
I basically have been, lax in the exam supervision myself, in the sense that I allowed students to use their own calculator and students to use scratch paper. It turned out that enabled students to look away on a regular basis from their screen. I couldn't tell if their eyes were moving to a second laptop or their phone, or whether they were, writing something down or they were consulting notes. But I could tell from the exam scores that that's what was going on. What I needed to do is make a change in the exams themselves. I made the numbers very simple, so scratch paper wasn't needed. I have to be able to see your eyes, and I have to be able to see where your eyes are going. So yes, I was lax initially, but over time, I realized that I needed to become much stricter in the approach.
I think some of it is exams. I think some of the grade inflation is also the nature of being in a pandemic. We are reading easier and allowing things that we would not necessarily allow. My students would agree with you, though. I think I'm very hard. And we're 5 weeks into this term, and there's very few students that haven't asked for an extension. And in one of my assignments last semester, I had 58% of my students fail for plagiarism. 58%. I've never had that. Turnitin.com caught them. They bought things off Course Hero. And of course, I can't give a 0 to 58% of my class. That would be awkward. So I had to make adjustments there too, which again goes to grade inflation.
There's lots of things that I think contribute to grade inflation, not the least of which is a good thing, human empathy. We're going through a really difficult, very challenging, unprecedented time. Our students are just as susceptible to this as anybody else, if not more. To be good people, to be understanding people, and to be supportive of our students, making some decisions in this acute environment that we may not otherwise make in a quote unquote normal situation. I'm not trying to denounce the fact that cheating is more prevalent when there's no supervision present, but I think there's lots of other things that can also be effectively manipulated to decrease grade inflation, in addition to just changing the way we supervise assessment.
I personally have become a little bit more lax in my grading standards and also accepting of late work. I've also incorporated what would have been a discussion in class into a very small stakes assignment where it's a discussion board. About 15% of the grade in my class comes from these easy to earn 2-point assignments, 1-point assignment, 3-point assignments, because students won't do the discussion board if you don't put a points on it. Finals used to be, 30, 35%, sometimes 40% of the grade. I've reduced the stakes to where it's much less. It's maybe 20 to 25%. We don't have the structured environment of coming to campus anymore. And so time management is one of the biggest struggles students are having. Back to the question with the lax exam supervision, when we switched in the spring of 2020 to fully online, we didn't have Proctorio then. And I saw my grades for all my classes just shoot through the roof. And so I adopted Proctorio to try to make it a level playing field as best as I could.
When you're in the classroom, if a student's eyes are moving around and they're off their own paper, I'm going to start tracking them. In fact, I'm going to be tracking them in a very straightforward way. I'm going to make sure that they understand that I know that they're looking at other things. If you think that tracking your eyes is an invasion of privacy, I'm doing that in the classroom during an exam. Absolutely.
I figure if they have a problem with the background, they can put a sheet up. There's ways to handle it. I told my students, because one student was concerned, his brother was in the room with them. I said, I don't care who's in the room with you as long as they're not talking to you. He goes, okay. Because he asked me, does he have to leave? I said, no, he didn't have to leave. Just don't have him talk to you. He shouldn't be interacting with you. Because I know that they're bunked up. I understand that. The background's the easiest thing to handle. I had a student take an exam in his car. That's what he wanted to do. And he asked if it was okay. And I'm like, yeah, power to you. I don't care what you do as long as it's quiet and you'll be successful.
Pretty strongly agree that this is an invasion of privacy. I would potential to be an invasion of privacy. One of the classes I teach is legal issues in the fields of kinesiology. And one of the things that we talk about is the civil tort of invasion of privacy. It's defined as things like invading or intruding upon somebody's physical solitude, publicly disclosing private facts or issues about a person. A person's home space, their home environment, is generally considered by the courts in this country to be a private space. Mandating that they give us access to their private space, regardless of whether it's benign or not, it doesn't matter if it's okay and if it's safe and there's nothing to be worried about. It's still their private space. So they have the right, legally defined in our civil tort law, to choose not to share that with people.
The background is easily replaceable. I set my office up to have a specific background because I'm trying to be professional. I don't expect my students to be professional. And if they're not comfortable with showing what's behind them because their living situation, isn't the best or something of that nature, put up a virtual background. I don't care. I don't really want to see your background, but I need to see you. I have the right to privacy, but I can't exercise that right as an instructor either. I have to be open and willing to share my environment and my sounds and everything else that's going on. I don't think that's too much to ask of my students either, especially when they're taking an exam where I need to be able to know that they did it on their own.
Well, I would strongly agree with that from my perspective because of the large classes that I teach, the multiple choice exam that I need to use to assess my students' knowledge of the subject. I would prefer not to. I got to tell you, it is one of the most boring things to do. I think everybody has mentioned it, is to sit there and watch video of people taking an exam. And that Proctorio does do a lot of flagging that doesn't need to be flagged, but we don't have an option. At least I don't have an option. The smaller courses, the upper division courses have the ability to modify their assessment approach. Unfortunately, I haven't found one that works for me other than what I'm currently doing, but I'm certainly open to it. And one of those is, let's get back to class in the fall,
I've used Proctorio. I believe it's more expensive. It's probably the reason why we didn't go with it. I understand the finances behind it, but I prefer Proctorio. Proctorio is a human watching you. There's a human watching you. So they're on your computer watching you. I think they only videotape when there's a problem, or they delete the videos immediately, and you get a report from the human. So there's an interaction. So if they, the exams were set up the same. My exams are open book, which of course is an interesting part, and they have to write and do all that stuff. So they can see all of that. So that's all set up in Proctorio, and they're aware of exactly what they're allowed to see. So they have to have a camera that shows their desk space. It's just a better system. And you really know the student taking it, because they do facial recognition and IDs. They do a lot.
I do recognize that a proctoring software program like Proctorio is a viable and necessary option for some professors, for some lecturers in some circumstances with some assessment content. That's not where I live. That's not the space that I work in. So it doesn't work for me. So to me, Proctorio is the worst possible option because we've got such a wide variety of different kinds of courses, different kinds of assessments, different content of those courses and assessments, different numbers of students, different workloads for employees. We need something that can provide some sort of structure and some sort of oversight. So I think it can work for some, but I also recognize where it clearly doesn't work.
I'm neutral and undecided because I don't know what else is out there. I don't have the time to go and investigate all this other stuff. I feel like that's a university type of responsibility for them to go out and see what is the best. And I'm not going to expect students to pay for it on like any kind of individual basis.